Trudy, what does the death camas look like?
Oh, the death camas, it's I don't know that I could actually recognize its leaf compared to the common camas, and that's probably why it was harvested at this time. But it blooms a little later and into the summer, towards the summer more, and definitely maybe later May, but it has a white pyramid type flower with little tiny flowers on it. So white, creamy white. It grows all over there's different species of it that grow all around the province in the interior as well as here. And I see it on dry rocky slopes, but I've seen it at Beacon Hill too, which was a big harvesting area. And probably it's proliferated a lot more since First Nations, because they probably dug it out and got rid of it, I would guess, because it is very poisonous and neurotoxin. So, and I have personally never eaten camas, but the interesting thing about camas is it has a certain kind of starch called inulin. It's a starchy plant. And if you think of First Nations diets or a native diet, and one in these times when we're, you know, when there was, you know, thinking of food shortages and things, and you think about what you could eat. And if you think of having that carbohydrate was an access, like there was probably lots more fish and proteins around, but having a carbohydrate, I mean, if we didn't have our carbs, we'd just be, you know, it's such good energy. And so it was a real high
We'd just be skinny.
Pardon me?
If we didn't have our carbs, we'd just be skinny.
We would be skinny. We would be really skinny, you know, and I'm sure First Nations were skinny. But even with the addition of camas, because they're not that big of a bulb, they're maybe, let's see, like I've seen bulbs like that, but you know, personally, I've never eaten them. I'm sure Nancy has, and they were pit cooked, you know, before there was actually metals, and that's one of the ways of cooking them. And I thought it would be Nancy does do pit cooking with camas bulbs that are harvested with First Nations. And I think it would be really interesting to try. Oh, here's Melissa. She sent did she send me oh, she did. Is Melissa's on the top? Did Melissa want to ask me a question? Nancy was one of my inspirational mentors. She and I Nancy went before me to do her PhD at UVic under Dr. Mark Bell, and she did it on ethnobotany, and she was always what inspired me to learn about botany and ethnobotany.
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Trudy, what's the best places to look at the wildflowers on Protection Island?
Ooh, the best places for sure. Well, I think the Trillium Trail. Well, one of the things I didn't talk about those trilliums, which I could talk a little bit, is you know how the fawn lilies is, and they showed in the video showed it was some of them were sort of pinky colored, and that's as they fade, they turn that beautiful pinky colored. So that they're not a different species or anything. They turn that pinky color. So a Trillium Trail, I think now we're probably peaked out on the trilliums, but there's still the Oregon Grape along Trillium Trail. Another, of course, one of the best places is Smuggler's Park, where the Garry Oak Restoration Project is going on, and it's fabulous because the camas are just starting to flower there. So definitely take a visit to Smuggler's and to see the camas. And if you look very carefully, over on the southern shore, there's some little bits of sea blush underneath, just on the very edge, where what happens is water seeps underneath the sands along the top of the sandstone, and grows and warms. And so that ecosystem, and it faces south, so that's a good place. And then all around, even on the roads, there's I think it's about across from Larry Ayahuasca's, there's an area, there's some sea blush just across the road there. Not quite past Emily's, but just down the road across there. That's a good place and the camas that comes in there. So, and another species that comes along soon will be the native buttercup. It's different than the native buttercup grows along with the camas. So you get those two beautiful primary colors together, that yellow and along with that blue camas, which are just really fabulous. Another good Garry, and also watch out for the dogwoods, which are not particularly associated with the Garry Oak part of it, the coastal Douglas fir. I sort of failed to tell you, but how the Garry Oak ecosystem fits into it. It is itself a part of the coastal Douglas fir ecosystem, and it is one of the most endangered. The coastal Douglas fir is the most endangered, one of the most endangered in Canada, but the Garry Oak ecosystem is even more within a subset of that, is really endangered as well.
Trudy, we seem to be having an overgrowth of pollen this season.
Yes.
Could you speak to that?
That's for sure. Yeah. The pollen, I think most of the pollen that is just, I wanted it on some of the pictures of the trillium in the video, it was just going along, that yellow along the veins was actually dusting of pollen. Oh my gosh, yes, there is a lot of tree pollen. And it's mostly, I think, it's the Douglas fir, that pollen cones, and they're just
is that
little tiny the Douglas has pollen cones and the female pine, the pine cone type thing, but the pollen cones are different, and they're kind of the tips of the branches. And oh my gosh, is it ever a pollen year?
Is that because they're stressed? Do they do that because they're stressed?
I've remembered other pollen years. I don't think they're stressed. The Douglas firs are doing fine. In fact, Douglas firs overshadow the Garry Oaks, and so with that was one of the things that to take away some of the young Douglas firs. They'll just grow over top, because the Garry Oak tree itself and the meadows need light, and they need that. They are all often on the south facing slopes and rocky shores, and so that's why they need the light, and so the forest can overtake them, and it can get what we call Douglas fir ingrowth. So,
Pam, hi there. It's Kate. I'm impersonating Emily because she loaned me her computer. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, just Pam. Pam posted a really good video this morning on for her Milner Gardens one, and it's on my website, my Facebook. I guess I could post it, but she talked about the pollen, and it was quite interesting what she said, how many microns, because I love the pollen. Everybody's complaining about it. I don't complain because I know it's there for a reason. It's called nature. But because of the Douglas fir trees, and she said how much there was in it, like a square inch or something. It's quite a lot because they have to throw the pollen to, propagate. But anyway, it's really an interesting one. I recommend that. I always thought trilliums turned pink because they had been pollinated by ants or whatever. That's what I had always been told. And Pam actually said something about once it's pollinated, they turn pink. I didn't think it was
correct,
aging.
yeah.
Is that right? Okay, I was just confused.
Yeah,
I'd love to know more.
Correct. It is. They are. Trilliums are pollinated by ants, and I'd probably, as most of you walked around in nature here, we've seen great anthills, and those trilliums, once they're pollinated, they do turn pink. That's true. They do. That's right. Yeah, they have these little nectary things that attract the ants, and for pollination.
Can I ask 2 more questions? Sorry, I've been good. I've been holding back. Can you talk more, Trudy, about the animals that hang out in the Garry Oak meadow? I heard about birds, but animals.
Oh yeah. Okay, a few animals. Yeah. So the animals, well, of course, in our Garry Oak ecosystems, we have we have 4 species of snakes on Vancouver Island, and the snakes at this time, they love sunning. But we have 3 species of garter snakes. So there's 3 garter snakes. We have the common, the northwestern, and what's the other one? Sorry. but then the real association with Garry Oak ecosystems is actually the sharp-tailed snake. We don't have those. They're pretty rare. There's some in they're distributed. They have a limited distribution. Often there's some on certain Gulf Islands and Pender Island, and they're just a tiny little snake that are just about the size of an earthworm, and they're pretty amazing because they're all. So that's one of the associations with Garry Oak ecosystems, and then the other. But many of the insects and the butterflies are limited to Garry Oak ecosystems. Some butterflies, like there's one called Taylor's checker spot, and it's up on a Garry Oak ecosystem up on Hornby Island. And it was on Hornby Island, and it's also on Denman Island, and it likes open areas. So it's a butterfly, and then there's a few others. There's a Propyrius dusky wing, some butterflies that are associated because butterflies like the sun, and they propagate. But there's also lots of little other little insects that really thrive in those lovely cracks in the barks in Garry Oak ecosystems. And so we had a whole group of people. So their insects are animals, and then mammal-wise. Actually, the Roosevelt elk probably once gray. I mean, we have the deer here, but in the past, Roosevelt elk was probably very common in the meadows. And that was one of the reasons also for First Nation burning, to increase the hunting, opportunities by increasing meadows for the Roosevelt, for the elks. And those were a species, but nowadays, there's not too many in Victoria, but there's a lot of deer, and then of the birds, we have lots. They're a wonderful place for owls because they have those, when their branches break off, they get these sort of hollows in the where the branches, often fork or something, and they get these hollows, and so they're very good places for they make cavities, natural cavities for owls, and in the old days, bluebirds used to nest in those. But nowadays, one of the reasons for the demise of bluebirds was this introduced European starling that's also a cavity nester that's very aggressive and can have 2 clutches a year, and 2 or 3, and can go in there. But there's lots of little, right now, singing a lot of, there was a white-crowned sparrow that was singing in there, and I've heard and warblers, lots of the warblers came through a few, last week there was yellow-rumped warblers and orange-crowned warblers are coming in now. So just many songbirds in the ecosystems and just all around. And in fact, when I was just sitting here, I could see those the violet green swallows, and not really a bird of the Garry Oak ecosystem, but right now the purple martins are coming back to their boxes. And I'm sure Jim and Heather have seen those coming back and singing their songs. So it's kind of cool. Any other animals? I've probably forgotten a few, but there's quite a few species like that of the birds. And then some that are extirpated are the Lewis's woodpecker. And I doubt if anybody's seen a Lewis's woodpecker because they are extirpated, which means that a species has gone from an area but occurs in other spots. And then there was the coastal vesper sparrow that was one we worked on. Its last spot was down in the Nanaimo airport because it liked that open area, but it slowly winked out, sadly. So we worked on that, but it's on the prairies, and it still is down in the prairies in Washington.